Hi everyone, Joe here, and welcome to 750 Gaming. In this one, we'll be looking at where this project first started, my Black Templars army. The Black Templars, a chapter of the Adeptus Astartes unlike any other. Zealously venerating the Emperor of mankind as a god, they have fought out their crusade in his name for the last 10,000 years. Born from the ashes of the heresy, the Black Templars are descendants of the 7th Legiones Astartes, the Imperial Fists. In the aftermath of the Horus heresy, the legions were broken up by Rabute Guilliman as he presented his new Codex Astartes to the Imperium. It served to organise the elite forces of the Imperium into smaller, coherent chapters that were tactically astute, yes, but never again powerful enough that one or two legions could best the rest of the Imperium's overall might in the event of a further future civil war. A noble act, a sensible act, but one that was much to the disdain of Rogel Dawn, Primarch of the Fists. As the Black Templars were cleaved from their ancestors, they were led in their infancy by the greatest of Imperial Fist warriors, the Knight Sigismund. Dawn's second in command and a commended hero during the Siege of Terra when Horus almost brought his heresy to fulfillment. The Templars have no homeworld, so to speak, but instead cruise the galaxy upon mighty war fleets, purging the known realms of alien, heretic and witch alike, and subsequent high marshals, fueled by their inherited zealotry, continue the cause on an endless crusade of penitence. Aware of the rift between Dawn and Guilliman over their very existence, the Black Templars would seek to serve only the legacy of their God Emperor as he sits, ever protecting from his golden throne. Issuing Guilliman's Codex Astartes, the Black Templars subdivide themselves into a variable number of individual crusades, each led by their own commander, who answers to the High Marshal alone. And it is said only the High Marshal himself truly knows how many crusades are in progress, and how many Templars actually exist. And so, as the current High Marshal, Helbrecht, continues his own personal crusade, hunting down the mighty Orc warboss Ghazghkull Thraka for his part in the desolation of the planet Armageddon, countless other crusades of unknown strength and number venture forth into the vast galactic sector, in the name of the Emperor, with their solemn vows to purge the heretic, to suffer not the unclean to live, to uphold the honour of the Emperor, to abhor the witch, to destroy the witch, and to accept any challenge, no matter the odds. One of my favourite films of all time is the Ridley Scott epic Kingdom of Heaven, and whilst it is ever up to debate about what Scott's best film is, I would argue that it is probably one of Orlando Bloom's better outings as an actor. If you haven't seen it, then spoiler alert. It's set in Jerusalem at the end of the Second Crusade, and you're supposed to sympathise with Bloom's character, Balin the Ibelin, as he ends up defending Jerusalem and its citizens. Well, that's a good knight story arc anyway. But there is also an intriguingly satirical, if somewhat sad portrayal of the bloodthirsty, warmongering Knights Templar who would justify all actions in the name of God. And of course, Games Workshop uses an awful lot of that Knights Templar motif and influence in the lore surrounding the Black Templars. And so this whole period of actual history and the rather loosey-goosey nature of the Black Templars organisation gives you an awful lot of scope to build an army to your own role-playing desires. Suffice to say, zealous sword-wielding warrior monks raging across the galaxy on an eternal quest for the God Emperor? Yeah, I'm all over that. And so that's where I eventually landed when I got back into this hobby after a 20-year break. At the time, I was full of excitement for the imminent arrival of a new codex and a nostalgia kick from that bit of 3rd edition John Blanche gloriousness, and I thought the Black Templars would be a great place to start. But when I started researching my army builds and unit choices and did some quick maths, I was immediately overwhelmed by it all. Put it this way, unless you have a lot of time and finance capital up front, this is not the easiest hobby to get into. Sure, you can pick up a box of minis and start the hobby side of the hobby relatively easily, and that's essentially what I did. But if you have aspirations of playing a 2,000 point game straight away, well, unless you have £300 to £400 to spend and a couple of weeks immediately to get it all ready, you're going to be a bit disappointed. So, after taking a step back and rethinking it all and trying to strategize my own personal entry strategy, I landed on this 750 concept. This first army then, my Black Templars, happened as an organic experiment, but the outcome has sort of set out a template for how I will create all my armies going forward. 750 points that are fun, fluffy and unique, for less than £100 and consisting of around 15 to 30 miniatures. And that's why I think the Black Templars are actually a perfect choice for a 750 army. You have this fantastically fluffy lore about zealous crusaders, and other than the odd restriction here and there, for instance, no witches, and that's to say psychers, you can kind of do what you want. Kinda. Whereas the lore for some Space Marine chapters would have them represented by a huge amount of miniatures on the table, such would be the scale of their typical deployment, the deployment of a Black Templar crusade could quite fathomably be represented by just a handful of minis. A 750 point army would be very fitting indeed. The mainstay of the Black Templars is, funnily enough, a crusade squad, a mixed unit comprising of fully fledged Black Templars called initiates and then neophytes. That's to say Black Templars in training, squires to their knights, if you will. It's bang on the Knight Templar script, just in space. These crusades are then led by a marshal, which is essentially just a Space Marine company captain with a fancy title, and they are supported by a chaplain, their spiritual guide, the most zealous of crusaders, essentially an army buffer. In the lore there's also a chap referred to as the Emperor's Champion, an initiate seemingly selected to experience a psychic heresy vision from the Emperor himself the night before battle. He would then volunteer himself to undergo various rituals and blessings to become a one-man army, the ultimate acolyte, and to serve in such capacity until, well, death. Same as everyone else, I guess. He just does it a bit more badass. Now, of course, Games Workshop make models for all these units, and since the landing of the new Codex for 9th edition, they've all had their Primaris reboots. The same for the key character models of High Marshal Helbrecht and the pretty gnarly Reclusiarch, that's head chaplain to you and I, Grimaldus. And they make a nice Primaris-sized Crusade squad too, but these sculpts obviously all come with a price tag. And, well, as the newer Primaris-sized models are still relatively new, naturally they are all the meta. And that's to say, most people playing Black Templars will be using these models, which, as nice as they are, it's just a bit boring. So, if we didn't want to just look like everyone else, or we didn't want to spend an extortionate amount of money on a 750 army of Black Templars, what could we do that would sort of fit in with some of the fluff, look effective, but also be unique to us? The first proper box I picked up when coming back into this hobby were some Vanguard veterans. I was just browsing what was in existence, as I say, having been out of the loop for about 20 years, and I just thought they looked pretty cool. So they ended up being the unit that I built this 750 point army around. I love the fluff that you can kind of give to these guys. They're a bunch of super zealous vets who can't wait to get in battle so bad they strap jump packs on to get there quicker. Yeah, that works. Admittedly, I've built them with a meta build. I'd already started assembling these while still chasing that competitive 2,000 point list ideal, so in this case they do have lightning claws and storm shields, but the idea of the shields does fit that knightly vibe, and whilst power swords would obviously be more appropriate, lightning claws are pretty cool. So, there you go. And as with the vast majority of these 750 armies we're going to be looking at, we're going to be using a 9th edition patrol detachment to organise our army. Now, I know Arcs of Omen has just been seeded for release, and will likely be free-falling into 10th edition before we know it. But I actually think if you're not chasing 2,000 point competition armies, then using the structure of a patrol detachment is actually a strong start for a balanced 750 point army. It works here, and whilst the Templars are the exception to most rules, we've still got to make sure that the army is gameplay viable. So, for purposes of the current rules, if you wanted to start a Warhammer 40k army today and not wait 6 months plus for 10th edition, this is what we're going with. So that'll be 2 HQ choices, obviously some troops choices, and of course the van vets to fit into that elite category. And then we can work out what space we've got left for any other units or upgrades. So, HQs. Okay, well, as I've said, you've got 3 real choices. You can take a Marshal, aka Fancy Captain, a Chaplain, or the Emperor's Champion. Now, I don't mind the Emperor's Champion as a unit per se, and I think the new sculpt is also kinda okay, and he's good for the fluff. And whilst I'm all about the fluff, at this early stage, I don't actually fancy justifying that much money on one single model, and not a lot of table presence other than a big sword to go with it. So, I thought we'd go for a Marshal and a Chaplain for this army. Now, as I was flicking through working out what I could do with these van vets, and how I could make a legal army to use them in, I was also browsing the types of captain available to us. There's a few Primaris ones listed with limited loadouts, or there's this Firstborn one that can take a jump pack too to fly in alongside those Vanguard veterans. Oh, and I can give him a Storm Shield as well. And a ridiculously mighty Thunderhammer. Considering he's charging in head first, I'm going to use the Paragon of Fury as his Warlord trait for +1 strength and possible mortal wound dealing on a charge. And with the Crusader's Helm Relic, we have an extra 3-inch range to his hit rerolls, and we can ensure those van vets are always in the Assault Doctrine. 1 HQ done. We're 140 points in already. The Chaplain also has various loadout options too, with various of Games Workshop models respectively. Again, we kitbashed our own here to save money. List-wise, I chose just your average Primaris Chaplain on foot, but I did make him a Master of Sanctity. It's another 25 point premium, but if he's going to be our spiritual cheerleader, we might as well fill him up to the brim with song. So, along with his Litany of Hate, we have the Psalm of Remorseless Persecution to give a unit melee mortal wound dealing on 6s, and the Oath of Glory to beef this Chaplain up a little. I also went a little crazy and made him a hero of the chapter, so I could give him an Iron Resolve Warlord trait and give him the Benediction of Fury Relic Crozius upgrade. It cost me 2 CP for the privilege, but it just makes him a bit more badassy. He's now a bit like the Emperor's Champion, who happens to know a few songs. Lovely stuff. And I'll address the command point and stratagem piece a little bit later. HQ number 2. 110 points for him, 250 points in total so far. Nice. Once upon a time you could field a Firstborn Crusade squad sans neophytes. Pick your choice of narrative options as to why these guys didn't have any squires, but it was an option, and it meant you could essentially just field a close combat orientated tactical squad. It isn't possible with Primaris Crusader squads, they got to have the neophytes. It's likely a marketing ploy, but it does also make sense. Otherwise, you might as well just be fielding Primaris Assault Intercessor squads instead. And in fact, that's actually the direction I chose, with a 5-man Assault Intercessor squad to fulfill the troop role in this patrol detachment. Significantly financially cheaper than buying an actual Crusade squad, plus the lack of neophytes saved a bit of point headroom too. After all the totalling up at the end, I actually had enough points spare to give these guys a holy hand grenade. It's fun, it's fluffy, and makes up for this not actually being a Crusade squad proper. Well, in my opinion anyway. So 110 points all in here, 360 so far. Now with regards to the Vanguard veterans, I actually bought some conversion bits alongside them to make them a bit more Black Templary when I did my initial purchase, and I had a few bits of broken Assault Squad Marine that I found from my childhood. And it meant I was actually able to bash together 7 Vanguard veterans as opposed to the original 5 that you get just from the sprues in the box. 6 of these guys got lightning claws, but the sergeant, or sword brother in Black Templar speak, didn't get a lightning claw, nor does he have a sword. No, he got a power fist. Why? Well, because we upgrade that fist to the Fist of Balthus Crusade relic, that's why. Oh, and we make him a champion of the feast for another command point. In for a penny and all that. Anyway, this guy is a unit, and that is all that matters. 225 points for the VVs and 585 for the army, ongoing. So now what to do? Well, I was playing around with my list and working out what else I could fit in, and then happened to fall upon someone selling some old Landspeeder Tornadoes on eBay. Now, for anyone who remembers, you got a Landspeeder with the old 3rd edition box set way back when, and nostalgia tidal wave later, well, the rule of cool always wins for me. I don't go too much on the old Space Marines these days, but I still think these things are cool, and I think these guys also fit in with the Black Templar fluff. It kind of makes sense to me anyway. If you've already got an airborne division, why not supplement it with another, right? Both have multi-melters, and then one with an assault cannon and the other with a heavy flamer respectively. They come in at 80 and 85 points, giving us a total of 750 points, bang on. Okay, so the elephant in the room. This is a 750 point army. So that's the incursion bracket as per the 9th edition Battleforged rules, which means you only get 6 CP command points to begin with. Experienced or meta competition chasing aficionados will likely scream at this point and say that that's not enough. And what's more, you've spent 3 already on your army build. What are you doing? Fair point. Let me address it. If you, like me, are building a 750 army like this because the scale of 40k in its current format completely overwhelms you when you first look at it, then actually having 12 plus command points and all the stratagems in all the books at your disposal probably won't actually help you. And as the whole idea of this 750 concept is to scale things back a little in order to make it more accessible, then why would you not do the same for some of the rules? Stratagems, after all, are totally optional in gameplay. You have the CP to spend, but that doesn't mean you actually have to spend it. So, for gameplay purposes, when I've been building these 750 lists, I've picked my top 3 stratagems that are available to that army, and they're the only strats that I'll use in gameplay for that army. Considering they are all mostly situational, including that 1 CP reroll, it works, and it simplifies the whole process. So in this instance, I've picked and will only use these strats. We'll use Vicious Riposte for mortal wound dealing on death. We'll go with Abhor the Witch for on-brand psychic denial. And because it just makes sense with Space Marines, we're going to take transhuman physiology to make these Primaris guys a bit tougher. It'll only affect the assault intercessors, but they're the guys who could end up being sitting ducks in the middle of the park as they slowly march up the field behind the airborne guys. The whole idea with this army is to get up in your face and make a mess of stuff. Space Marines are generally tough enough in combat with most things to stick around, so if they can get there, then there should be balance. We'll be accepting the challenge no matter the odds as our vow, which makes everything hit really hard in combat. We're not going to win too many points for OBSEC, but that's not the point here. My idea is for the land speeders to go on some sort of initial strafing, fire-drawing, attention-grabbing fun, whilst I try and get the infantry up into faces and deal some damage. If everything sticks around for long enough, then it'll win by killing stuff and denying OBSEC, as opposed to achieving it. So that's a 750 point list then. It's relatively elite. Being Space Marines, that's natural. It is only 16 models worth of plastic. Granted, 2 of those are land speeders, so technically actually it's only 14 infantry, but therefore it all fits nicely into that miniature count criteria for a 750 army. So the big question is, did I manage to do it for less than £100? Well, yes, but not straight out of the box. So here is the big caveat and perhaps the first proper apology of this series. As mentioned, this was my first army and foray back into the hobby. It got created organically after nearly being thrown into the bin at various points, and it kind of became a passion project. It's both the best and worst example of a 750 army because whilst kitbashing and proxying is inevitably necessary to make this whole thing cheaper, this army has a lot of it, and so probably it's not actually the best choice to start with. However, it is unique, it's mine, and it is doable. So, here we go. Now, Games Workshop actually make a sculpt for that Smash Captain, and recently just re-released it as a limited time made to order product. But it's naturally costing somewhere around the £18 to £20 mark, the recommended retail price. So, mine was created using the same conversion bits and broken Space Marines as we'd used to make an extra 2 Vanguard veterans. The Van Vets box and the bits from Spellcrow all came from Whaling Games, which I tend to use for my purchases. With 20% off the Games Workshop RRP, you can save quite a lot by doing it like this. And a bit of green stuffing and a lick of paint later to separate him from the crowd, hey presto, my own unique character. The Van Vets got all hyped up with conversion parts and a bit of green stuff to make their tabards. I had to switch a few shield arms around as some of the lightning claws from the sprues were for the other arms, for, when you wanted to field just those few guys with a pair of lightning claws. But we made it work, again, with a bit of green stuff. As I said, the box came 20% off, so once I'd converted everything up and added some 3D printed storm shields that I'd got off of an Etsy store for another few quid, I worked out that we'd probably done these and the Smash Captain for around 40 quid all in. It's the same story for the Chaplain. Rather than spend 20 odd quid on the GW one, I bought a Stormcast Eternal Secateur single off of eBay for 3 quid. And once I'd assembled and stuck a few chaplain-y looking bits and bobs to him, it's very obvious what he's meant to be. Very obviously not the same as the Games Workshop standard chaplain sculpt, and of course, very much cheaper. The Assault Intercessors got left relatively plain. Deliberately so. They are your stock and trade guys here. Now I could easily have given them tabards too, to represent a Crusade Squad type proxy thing, but considering a lot of the other infantry of the army is converted in some way, I thought I'd just let these guys go as is. I might come back to them later, you never know. And I picked up this squad of 5 from eBay for around 12 to 15 quid for just the sprues. And the land speeders, well, I got them at 20 quid for the pair. An absolute steal. So all in all, I think this army only comes to around £80 in total. Now, am I going to say that everyone can easily find a pair of land speeders on eBay for dirt cheap? Absolutely not. But if you think a bit more outside of the meta on Games Workshop brand box, it's very apparent that you can save money and do things a bit differently, a bit uniquely. This all worked for me because I love land speeders. You may hate them with a passion and so look for something else. They take up around 160 to 170 points in the list, so that's another squad of Vanguard veterans if you fancied. Get them from your friendly local gaming store too, and you can probably get them for around the same price. Okay, so criteria 2 met. What about criteria number 3? Is it fun? Well, it's certainly unique, that's for sure. But is it fluffy? Yeah, I think so. I think with the airborneness of it all, it can definitely work with the lore. It would probably be improved by a Crusade Squad proper, but I'll take a negative point on that one for the sake of meeting the money criteria. Being a small numbered elite force, I also think it fits with the accept any challenge no matter the odds vow quite nicely. As mentioned, it's a very melee orientated army, and being so small in number, it will struggle to hold objectives. But that's okay, because like I said, I didn't create this army to win. Well, not like that anyway. And so that gives you all the fun. You know exactly what you're aiming to do here, and whether you can achieve it is all down to the dice. And, you know, you and your opponent strategizing and counter-strategizing and all that. Oh, and like, you know, 16 models? You can play these games nice and quickly, giving you loads of opportunity to replay again and switch it up. All that kind of thing. So yeah, I think it's fun and fluffy. Criteria number 3, tick as well. And so there you go. For around 80 quid, I've created my very own unique 750 point Black Templar army, which fits my raging quickly into battle full of Black Templary buffed melee nastiness and flyboy stuff. Nice. As mentioned, this probably isn't the army for just anyone to start a 750 journey with. It's maybe one for later on down the line if you've got a few under your belt already. And the next army we'll look at is actually probably a better choice. But as this was my first foray back into 40k, it kind of feels natural for it to be the starting point. And hopefully it inspires some of you and gets you to think a little bit more outside of the box, or boxes. Because what it does go to show is that with a little bit of creativity, you can use some models you might already have, maybe from 20 years ago or from a spontaneous unplanned purchase, and save a bit, or in some cases, a lot of money. You can also make a playable army without having to overwhelm yourself with that 2,000 point target needlessly. And of course, if you want to go big further down the road, you find you've got yourself a nice little platform from which to launch. But in my experience, I found that actually, you can have just as much fun with just the 750 points of Psychotic Space Knights as 2,000. Thanks for watching. Let's go! As ever, I don't know how often I'm going to be putting together these videos and uploading content here, so if you find this concept interesting and worth following, then your best bet is to hit subscribe so you don't miss a beat. Hopefully some links to some other videos of mine should have appeared by now, and hopefully I'll see you next time.